Previously on the American Justice Podcast.
The judge has to instruct Miss Morales from the defense to move to where she can see the map as well because she's going to be the one doing the cross-examination. The defense attorney doesn't do this of her own free will? Are these people even trying? You're a goddamn defense attorney, and the judge just noticed that you weren't even paying attention in her courtroom? In your own case? This isn't high school math class, folks.
There is an epidemic in America's criminal justice system. The prosecution and conviction of innocent people for crimes they did not commit. Welcome to American Justice. The American Justice Podcast Army works to free men and women wronged by the criminal justice system. It's not only about the innocent who have been imprisoned, but also the victims of the crimes as well. No one deserves justice more than them. And now, here's your host, Scott Pogensy.
Hello, AJ Army. Welcome back to your podcast. This week, we'll be wrapping up the second part of our coverage of Day 3 of the state of Wisconsin versus Vincent Cosey. We're going to start with Vinnie's brother, Ernest. So without any further ado, let's get it going.
I've seen these big machines come rolling through the quiet times. Blue suits and bankers with their Volvos and their Valentines. Give us this day our daily discount outlet merchandise. Raise up the multiplex and we will make a sacrifice. Now we're gonna get the big business.
Ernest Cosey, fresh from the penitentiary, if there is such a thing, takes the stand on the record, but away from the jury. Why away from the jury, you ask? Let's just say the judge, prosecutors, and defense need to test the waters in a controlled environment. He is currently serving a sentence in prison, but here he is to testify against Vincent on the behalf of the state. So he has been bench warranted to the courtroom to testify against Vincent. He's had 11 criminal convictions and 6 juvenile adjudications, and some of these are violent offenses. Was it possible that the people in charge of Vincent's investigation went after the wrong Cosey? Well, here's a spoiler for you. They never even bothered to look at Ernest as a suspect. All right, so back to the trial. He's not happy. He wants to know why his shit has anything to do with this. Shit. In court. He said the word shit in a courtroom with a judge and a district attorney present. This guy is well aware of who he is, where he's at, and what the consequences are. He just doesn't care, even if anything he could say would possibly help his brother and keep him from being incarcerated forever. Eventually, you'll wonder which of Vincent's family members who took the stand on his behalf or as character witnesses for the state are the most selfish. It's coming. Don't worry. They explain that he's a witness against Vincent, but he doesn't understand why he's being questioned about his own record. His temper intensifies, as does his language. For someone who spent as much time in a courtroom as Ernest Cosey has, you'd think he'd have it down to an art by now. Nope. He obviously wasn't paying too much attention during his previous trials. He is refusing to cooperate regarding his own criminal history. The defense states that they were supposed to be provided with criminal histories of all witnesses, and they were never given one that belonged to Ernest. In all fairness, even in the world of 2006, all anyone would have to do is get someone with a badge to print one out. It was all available online, even 15 years ago. Still, Ernest is going to make Racine County sing for their supper. Ernest Cosey is making them obtain his criminal record, so he steps down and is replaced by another witness. This one, also known at the last minute, has a criminal conviction as well. Her name is Sonia Blake, and she was on welfare and had a car in her name. Wait, that's a crime in Wisconsin? How in the hell can you get a job to get off welfare if you don't have a car? This place becomes a little more backward with every turn of the page. Just another example of how the powers that be keep their thumb on the unfortunate to help make it stay that way. Now, Sonia Blake is Vincent Cosey's mother. The state swears Sonia Blake stated that Vincent was sorry for killing Stephanie Goins, but she claims that was never said.
Vincent never told me that he killed the girl, and I never told the police that he did it. And he still tells me that he didn't do it.
So here we are 15 years later, and he's still maintaining his innocence. A lot of times people will, if they are guilty, they'll kind of come to that, they'll kind of settle that within their own brain, and they'll kind of, own up to it and say, okay, you know what, they got me. I did it. But here we are 15 years later, and he's still very adamant that he had nothing to do with this.
Right.
As a matter of fact, she denies everything that the state claims or doesn't recall anything at all. Unfortunately, not a single investigator in this case bothered to record any statements being made during their investigation. Other than the written statements provided by a handful of people, there's nothing on the record. Nothing at all. The state supplies her with her report from the morning after the murder. She claims that some of the information in the report is right and some of it is wrong. Of course it is. This will become common practice during the trial since nothing was recorded. Law enforcement claims witnesses said one thing on the night of the murder, but put the opposite information in their written statements the following day. There's nothing to prove this. Nothing at all. The state asks if she ever stated that Vincent was sorry for what he did. The defense objects and the judge overrules. Well, I can see where this is going. The state claims that Ms. Blake already knew Vincent had taken Stephanie's life. The defense objects again to the leading. The judge agrees, but allows it? What in the hell is going on in Racine County, Wisconsin? That procedure makes no sense whatsoever. The judge sustains an objection made by the defense, but allows the prosecution to continue with the question? Vincent's mother states that her house was surrounded on the night of the murder. She was forced to go outside while the police searched her house.
Did they keep, harassing you guys all night? Like, hey, you need to tell us where he's at, you need to tell us where he's at, or did they just kind of check the house and then left and you didn't hear from him again?
No, they kept saying they were gonna, if they see him, they was gonna kill him.
Oh my gosh, did they really?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Ernest pulled up and was immediately arrested because the police thought that he was Vincent. They let him go. I can sense a fear in this woman's testimony, as though this isn't the first time that she's had to deal with the police like this. She feared for her son's life, even though she had no idea if he was involved in the crime or not. The police were searching for him, and almost immediately after Stephanie's body was found. Didn't Stephanie have several male friends? Why was Vincent fingered so quickly? It's obvious the family feared that they would kill him if they found him and he started to resist. An officer even brings up the subject of Vincent's safety if he refuses to surrender. Are we sure that we're not in Texas?
And now, hang on to your hats. Keep your arms and legs inside the ride at all times, because it's time for a rider's note from head writer C. Derick Miller.
Ernest pulled up to where the police were mustering. He has a violent criminal history. Where was he coming from at such a convenient time? I bet you dollars to Racine County Donuts that the police never searched his vehicle for evidence just because he wasn't Vincent.
Anyway, it wasn't just the police staging at Miss Blake's home. It was a SWAT team. Guns, shields, gear. They were marching in formation through the alley behind her house, making as much noise as they could, trying to spread as much fear into the neighborhood and its residents as possible so they'd give up Vincent. The defense asked Sonia if she'd lie for her son. She replies with no. She wasn't brought up like that. She claims the police made her feel like a dog. The prosecution keeps asking why she was scared and upset about the police being at her house, and Sonia Blake can't seem to make them understand. I don't know much about the state team, but I do know that they're not African American. Fast forward 15 years and you can be damn sure that no one need ask these type of questions. The state is also repeatedly talking down to Miss Blake. They ask her if her phone was a landline and she doesn't quite understand the terminology. Then they dumb it down for her and say, quote, "Is it a cell phone or does it plug into the wall?" When she shows confusion towards the difference between AM and PM, they break it down to, quote, "in the morning or at night."
I'm seriously getting upset as I read this. My face is hot. As a former employee of a sheriff's department and spending years in a courtroom, I've witnessed several occasions where people in positions of authority talk down to minorities for the simple fact they believe them to be inferior. To further validate this statement rather than just explain what I'm feeling, I've also heard these same attorneys and elected officials talk mad shit about the same people as soon as court was adjourned. There's no way to deny that.
All right, so Tatiana Cosey takes the stand. She is Vincent Cosey's sister. She claimed she had a phone conversation with Vincent the night of the murder and already knew that they were looking for him, but she did not inform him of that. She had no idea why. She handed the phone to her brother Ernest. Man, if you can't trust family. I love this. Here's part of the trial that you're going to love. Question. All right, let me get this straight. Your mom calls you, says they found a body. The police are looking for Vinnie, and it causes you to leave your house and go to your mom's house. In the meantime, you talk to Vinnie, but you never told your mom that you talked to him. Answer, no. Question, why not? Answer, because it ain't really matter. Question, it ain't really what? Answer, it ain't really matter. Question, it didn't matter? Answer, no. Question, to who? Answer, to me. Well, the well-to-do people in the prosecutor's office just don't understand, quote, street language. Even if it were offered as an online course, they just don't get it. In the few minutes she did talk to Vincent, she claimed that he was crying. We've already established that this is a very small community and everyone knew the news almost as fast as it occurred. Killer or not, his girlfriend just died. Wouldn't you be crying? The sister is sticking to the yes or no formula pretty well as the state basically repeats the same questions offered to her own mother just moments before. Impressive. I just wish I could go back in time and see the look on her face while answering these questions. I can only imagine while reading the testimony. Between Ernest's tirade at the beginning of the court day and the mother's testimony, it's easy to tell that the apples in the Cosey family didn't fall far from the tree. They're definitely family. Every line of questioning now seems to end with, quote, strike that. Either the witness is stumping them or they're trying to sneak up on the brick wall that she's built in her head. Then she trips up on whatever story she'd convinced herself of in her own head since the investigation began. Yes, I'm sure she knew deep down that at one point or another, she'd be sitting in this very seat in this very situation. No, she didn't talk to Vincent during the 30-minute phone call in question, but she did speak to him 3 other times that night. She also claims that her police statement on the night of the murders is more than likely incorrect. That's odd. The mother claimed the same exact thing. If only there were a device that recorded audio or video to back up these written statements. If only. The police say one thing, the witness says another. He said, she said. Who to believe? She claims the word, quote, might is missing from her handwritten report. The conversation that follows between the witness and the prosecution resembles that of a small child who's been caught red-handed and refuses to confess. If not a child, then definitely a cheating ex-lover. Unfortunately, I know what both of these sound like. It's easy to see that she's blatantly lied on the stand about communicating with Vincent on the night of the murder, but she doesn't seem to care about the consequences. Luckily, this is Racine County, Wisconsin, and no one who works in a courtroom seems to know courtroom procedure, or laws for that matter. Not even so much as a slap on the wrist, just as I expected. Cross-examination. Tatiana describes Vinnie as a man of few words. See, I told you the apple didn't fall far from the tree. The police officers pulled her over twice within a few minutes while looking for Vincent. The same officers. Going back to my earlier statement, this tactic doesn't surprise me at all. Again, this is a town with a minimal black population, and the big bad police force was parading through the neighborhood using every scare tactic imaginable to find and arrest the one and only suspect they invented to close this case as quickly as possible. Remember, someone heard what could have been Vincent's voice during a phone call. That's more than enough to lock the door and throw away the key, isn't it? She claims that she was forced into writing a report by the police, but never threatened. Then again, does she know the meaning of the word threatened? What is threatening to members of the white community in Caledonia, Wisconsin, might be normal treatment to everyone else.
I'm going to nerd out here for a moment, but I'm pretty sure threatening translates into a SWAT team, armed and in full battle armor, marching loudly through the back alleys like orcs on their way to Helm's Deep in Lord of the Rings.
All right, in this next exchange, the prosecutor tries to sneak one by Tatiana. He phrases the question in a way that she doesn't understand, and then tries to end his questioning real quick before anyone notices. I think it's the equivalent of getting a controversial call in football and then trying to run the next play before the other team has a chance to review the play. Anyway, here's the sneaky bastard in action. Redirect examination by Mr. Repeshak. Question. Even if it was intentional and Vincent told you that, you wouldn't tell me, would you? Answer. I wouldn't tell you? Question. Yeah, thank you. No further questions. The witness. What did he mean? The court, meaning the judge. Are we done? Ms. Patterson. No. Recross-examination by Ms. Patterson, the defense attorney. Question. Did you understand the last question? Answer. No. If he said, even if Vincent told me, it wouldn't have what? I wouldn't have told you. Ms. Patterson. Let me ask the question again. Oh, judge interrupts. Well, we're on recross, but let's clarify this so everyone knows where we're going. I'm going to go back to let Mr. Repeshak ask the question, and then you can recross if you need to. Redirect examination by Mr. Repeshak. Question. Even if Vincent told you, play devil's advocate here, even if Vincent told you that he killed Stephanie intentionally, you wouldn't tell me that Vincent told you that, would you? Answer. Why wouldn't I? The court. Anything more, Mr. Repeshak? Mr. Repeshak, no. What in the actual French fuck is going on in the courtrooms of Wisconsin? Yes, I know that French fries are potatoes, and those are most likely coming from Idaho, but I couldn't write a joke that involved cheese. Yes, I know the record will show all of these redactions and scratches, but the mind of the jury just doesn't work that way. They remember everything. The court is about to call Ernest Cosey to the stand, but they're discussing which of his prior convictions to mention in the courtroom. The way I see it, the county appears to be so small that all the jurors probably already know. It was probably being discussed in the lobby outside the courtroom, just like every other bit of evidence since the beginning of this trial. Now, if the judge asks, no one will claim it, but come on. We all know this already, right? There's nothing else to talk about in Caledonia. I won't bore you with all the violent felonies and drug charges. Again, we are sure they nabbed the right Cosey, aren't we? The prosecution, of course, being the racists that they are, at least from what I can decipher from the court transcripts, want to introduce all of his felony convictions to the jury to show a pattern. Why? Ernest Cosey isn't on trial here. Should he be, though? No, I refuse to let this go. The defense wants to know why 2 deputies are behind Ernest Cosey on the stand with 4 other deputies in the courtroom. Cosey didn't want to testify, and they believe the extra officers would be necessary if he acted out violently. The court rules to keep the extra security. See? Violence? Cosey? Pulled up from being who knows where after Stephanie's body was discovered? If only it were that easy. Considering how well the testimony went for the sister, I can't wait to introduce the world to the brother. Ernest Cosey claims that Vincent was calm during their phone conversation. No crying or suicidal speech. He claimed the officers who pulled him over and accused him of being Vincent Cosey, and they threatened to kill him. They handcuffed him and threw him against the side of their squad car. 15 minutes later, another officer arrived with a photograph proving that this was not Vincent. Still, Ernest Cosey isn't cooperating with the prosecution either, just like his sister. He denies almost everything in the reports from the night of the murder. Once the confrontation with the police ended, they followed Ernest to his girlfriend's house. He didn't know it until a neighbor called and said the police were snooping in the windows, dressed all in black. Sneak level? 0. He eventually talked Vincent into turning himself in to the police to keep from getting hurt. Clearly, Ernest Cosey, as well as Vincent, knew a thing or two about the demeanor of the local police. Some of the officers even suggested it to him. If the cops are telling you they'll hurt you, believe them. Still, and hear me out, Ernest Cosey had a history of violence, was unaccounted for during the time of Stephanie's murder, and talked Vincent into turning himself in as quickly as he could. I can't help but wonder. All right, Officer Andre Stewart from the Racine Police Department takes the stand. He's the same officer who pulled over Tatiana. No one ever verifies on whether or not it was the first time she was pulled over or the second time only moments afterwards, but he was one of the officers who pulled her over as all of the Caledonia badges were descending on the Cosey family homes and hangouts. Now, ladies and gentlemen of the American Justice Army, get ready for a lot of, quote, claims. The officer claimed she said Vincent was going to shoot himself. He also claimed that no one threatened Ernest Cosey, which he claimed during his testimony. He claims Tatiana said Vincent claimed to be waving the gun around and it went off. He claims that Tatiana stated that Stephanie is dead and both of the families will suffer. He claims he got pretty much the same statements from Ernest and tried to convince him to get Vincent to turn himself in. He didn't want Vincent to hurt any of the officers, and he didn't want Vincent to be hurt by the officers. At least everyone involved knew who they were and what they were capable of. Again, many vocal claims and statements which would have meant something, if not everything. If someone had pulled their head out of their ass earlier in the investigation and rounded up a video camera, digital voice recorder, or just a basic tape recorder. Hell, the damn bird and stone tablet they used in the Flintstones would have been a welcomed addition to their repertoire at this point. Okay, so one thing I want to talk about before we end this episode, and there's really not a good place to talk about it since the prosecution never entered it into evidence, and that is the presence of a rape kit. That's right, the police investigators did a rape kit on Stephanie's body that night. Now, you may be asking yourself, or more poignantly asking me, Scott, what were the results? And that would be a healthy question to ask. However, we don't know. The police never published the results of the rape kit. Don't you think that if the rape kit had Vinnie's DNA, that would have been published and presented at trial? Of course it would. Now there's two options here. Either it didn't contain any DNA, or it contained someone else's semen. It would be reasonable to think that it didn't contain any DNA and that the state just said, yeah, hey, you know what? We did a rape kit, but it didn't find anything. No harm, no foul, right? It would be reasonable that if the kit contained either Vinnie's DNA or no DNA, that the results would have been published. So the fact that it wasn't ever made public leads me to believe that it had someone else's DNA in it. Again, we can only speculate since the police never released the results. But Vinnie has gone as far as to request those results in the courts. Did the judge allow him or his attorneys to see the results? Of course fucking not. Here's Vinnie talking about it.
All right, going back to this, to the rape kit, you said that that the judge ruled in her ruling that that because this wasn't a rape case, that they did not, that they didn't have to turn over the results. Did it sound like they had results and they just weren't going to turn them over, or did she say if there are results, then we're not going to turn them over? She didn't know.
They basically were trying to make it like they didn't have nothing or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? All that time, I never even had the results of the inside of the car because they took the car to the Milwaukee Crime Lab, and they tested the car. They went through the car and said it was no blood, no gunpowder residue, no nothing found in the car all through there. I had to report on that. If you got this big car there already and then you only had some clothes or something like that, how would you think you went through this car and tested this car for DNA evidence and then you didn't test these clothes or anything else that you had for DNA evidence? So it just don't make sense. It's not, no, none of that add up.
So you don't know if they tested your clothes that you had on?
They did, and none of it had no results of what they wanted, basically. So they didn't want me to have the stuff to present to the jury. That was the whole thing.
Right.
Like I said, they sent it to the one in Virginia and then to Milwaukee Crime Lab. That was all I know, you know what I'm saying? And then at the time of my trial, they never even told me, my lawyers never even told me if they had no DNA evidence. All they would let them present was that they found no DNA connected in the car or no gunpowder, no nothing, you know what I'm saying, like that. That's all they would let them present at the trial.
Yeah, because obviously if it did, they would have presented it.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If anything was in their favor at that time, they would have blew it all the way out of the proportion. Yes, we got his DNA.
All calls other than properly placed attorney calls may be monitored and recorded.
Yes, we got blood, we got this, we got that, we got everything to connect him to this crime. There's no need to do nothing. You know what I'm saying? They wouldn't need to do nothing if they would have did that, if they had that.
Yeah, there's just no way that you would kill somebody and then have on the same clothes and not have something on you.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And like I said, that's when the whole surveillance thing come in. Then they said the surveillance was not taping the night of that night, but they just was watching the house through the surveillance. That was it.
Yeah. So you didn't sleep that night, I guess, right?
Huh?
You didn't sleep that night? You were on the phone pretty much all night?
I didn't sleep basically at all that night. I didn't even sleep. Basically, when I got to the jail, I didn't know what was going on so long, you know what I mean?
All right, AJ Army. That's going to do it for this week's show. This wraps up day 3 of the Vincent Cosey murder trial. Next week, we'll start part 1 of day 4. You won't want to miss all of the shenanigans the criminal justice system pulls on Vinnie this day. So until next time, remember to stay aware, stay strong, and get involved. See you next week.
The American Justice Podcast is owned and copyrighted by Atua Productions, LLC. Your host is Scott Pogensey, and your writer is C. Derick Miller. The theme music for the American Justice Podcast has been created and composed by Josh DeRosa. Atua Productions aims for this to be an interactive podcast where you, the audience, has a great amount of influence on the content of our shows. You can interact with us in several ways. First, and most preferred, is you can leave us a voicemail. Our phone number is 972-942-0444. Be sure to leave your name and the city you're calling from, along with whether or not we can use your voice on the air. If Facebook is more your style, you can log on to our Facebook page at facebook.com/American Justice Podcast. Feel free to leave a comment, or you can message us on Messenger if you have a more pressing question or issue. If you would like to blog about the show, then you can log on to AmericanJusticePodcast.com and tell us what you think there. You can find many of the documents discussed in this episode there as well. If you are a tweeter, you can also voice your opinion on Twitter at AJusticePodcast. If you would like to support the show, you can do so in a couple different ways. First, consider visiting our Patreon page at patreon.com/AJPodcast. We have different levels of support that include t-shirts, guest call-in spots, and early access to our podcast and YouTube shows. Next, you can like, subscribe, and click the bell icon to get notifications of when we publish episodes. We would also very much appreciate it if you could give us a 5-star review. If you have any comments about the show, or more importantly, any tips on the case we're discussing, please call 972-942-0444 and leave us a message. After all, if the subject of our podcast is innocent, that means someone out there is guilty. American Justice Army? Let's find them.